Welcome everybody. Welcome. We're live. I'm here with Leigh, and maybe Scott will show up here in a little bit too. I think Scott's still asleep. We'll see if he comes on. But right now it's Leigh. Leigh is a Flux maintainer. Today we're going to be talking about Flux, and then we're going to talk about like how it works with vCluster, or see if it does work with vCluster. But spoiler, like we've tested this out a little bit before. We've got docs on it, so we're going to kind of show how you can deploy vCluster and deploy into it. But
we were
welcome,
in the
Leigh.
lab.
Yeah, I was in the lab yesterday, messing around, just trying to make sure I could at least show some kind of like interesting demo. But these Fridays, yeah, we're just going to test to see what open source projects work. If they don't work, then we'll say, hey, this doesn't work. But obviously Flux does. I'm going to go ahead and hand it to Leigh for a moment, and I'm going to bring up the actual Flux like website and stuff like that, and ask the initial question, what is Flux? But first off, if you have questions and stuff like that, post them in the chat. We'll answer them, and then like if you have questions during the demo and stuff, let us know. But Leigh, what is Flux? Right, like what's Flux 2.6? What's going on with Flux lately?
Yeah, we've got a lot of exciting motion in the Flux project. And Flux is a graduated CNCF project, so it's at the same level as some of the more well-renowned ones, like Kubernetes itself, Linkerd, Istio, etc. Flux is a GitOps family of tools, and we provide a secure, a scalable, and really a powerful substrate for you to do whatever you want with continuous delivery in a cloud native way, right? And I use that term continuous delivery in the very kind of DevOpsy intention. And so say just to keep it simple, right? You start with a Kubernetes cluster, and you've got your team and you're deploying your first app, right? You might start to read a little bit of the Kubernetes docs or follow a tutorial, and you've got your deployment YAML, a service YAML, and then maybe some ingress or gateway thing that you're using in Google Cloud. You kubectl apply those to the cluster. And then you are iterating, and next week you want to update your container image because you did a build, right? And so you started messing around with GitHub Actions or Jenkins or something. And now you got to deploy a change to the cluster. This is pretty manageable, right? You're basically using one distributed computer for one thing on one team. And the state of things is not so complicated.
Yeah.
But as we start to make the distributed computer solve more of a distributed infrastructure problem, right? Lots of teams, lots of people communicating with each other, people with different expertise. Then we start to crave a higher order of configuration management, right? So before we used to use things like Puppet, Ansible, and this pattern, even back in the days of Puppet, started to emerge, right? Which is having a control repository. So this is really what we mean when we think about GitOps, right? GitOps is not just a way for you to use a technical tool to solve a technical problem, but you're solving that technical problem in a social way. And so before really getting into the details of what Flux is technically and literally, really spiritually, Flux is a collaboration tool. It is a way for you to glue the place where you work with your teammates with your distributed computer, your Kubernetes clusters. And that can be one cluster, or it could be 100 or multiple thousands. There are people out there at part of very, very large organizations doing, name brand things that you know of in your everyday life that behind the scenes are continuously delivered and collaborated on, delivered by Flux. So that's kind of the gist of things. Literally, Flux is a set of controllers that let you do continuous delivery in a cloud native way. You scroll down a little bit, right? We talk a little bit on this page. This is FluxCD IO, the landing page. We talk about the benefits of GitOps, right? It's for apps and for infrastructure. So not just the web servers that you're deploying, but you can manage your CNI, you can manage your gateways, your cert manager add-ons, anything that you want across your platform, across a fleet of clusters, and then have some sort of auditable train where you can, say, okay, who did what for what reason, right? Adding that context inside of those pull requests. And Flux can do this for you by gluing your control repos in any shape and any way you want. In the bottom left there, we've got just a call out that we really have intentional support for multi-tenant environments. Flux does a really great job of being secure across the board in the way that we implement the controllers. We don't shell out to any random binaries or anything. There's no extra cache that's accessible over a network that is copying the state of your entire Kubernetes cluster. We don't keep secrets in memory for very long. It's just a really wonderful piece of software. And I'm glad to be here nearly a decade later on the most recent iteration of the project to talk a little bit about why people love Flux so much. If you've not used it before, I think Flux and vCluster in particular work really, really well together. And just excited to be here with you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you too. I think you're talking about managing, CRDs and stuff across the board. You're not relying on the users to do that to keep everything up to date. Then I guess like that's a little bit better of a workflow. Instead of like, hey, go update your CRDs. They're like, no, or they forget. They're not even updating their Kubernetes version like on their clusters, right? So like you can't expect CRDs and everything to be up to date.
Yeah, those managed platforms really do make the hard part of the Kubernetes cluster ops very easy to solve. But then what, right? Now you've got Kubernetes as a service. What are you going to do with it? And people hop over to the landscape, pick 10 to 30 different add-ons, and now you've got your own job to do. Flux can help you stay organized so that even when you leave that team, like the people who come after you have a clean garden to enjoy and walk around peacefully in instead of experiencing existential dread. So
you don't see like your name show up on like a mailing list, or like you don't see your old infrastructure show up on a mailing list. Like, how does this work? So that's a story from before. It's like I was working at a company and I deployed OpenStack for them like 2013 or so, and then I ended up going to another company that did OpenStack like Mirantis. And I was watching the lists, and then all of a sudden, like 2 or 3 months after I was gone, they're like, "Hey, how do I get Keystone to connect to Active Directory again?" Because they had deleted the configuration, but I wasn't using Puppet or anything like that at the time. Like so. Yeah, I did not leave them with the best of configurations, I guess, and it was super complicated to get set up anyways. Like I had to figure it out.
The creepy music starts playing. The configuration is coming from inside the infrastructure, All
right, so you told me you're talking about what we're gonna do today is we're gonna do like the getting started with Flux. We're gonna go through this, and then we're gonna deploy with Flux with the we're gonna take a look at the getting started, and we're gonna do the vCluster stuff, and we're gonna demo that. But you're talking about the control plane, or not, sorry, the Flux operator is probably a better way of doing this now instead of just going through the getting started. Like we should check out the operator. Like, is that after I've played around with it, or should I start day one with the operator?
Either is actually totally fine.
Okay.
There's a lot of people who use Flux are very familiar with the command line, which has a idempotent command called bootstrap. When I say idempotent, that means that you can kind of run it over and over again, and you pretty much get the same exact result. So like you can just re-bootstrap a cluster over and over again, and Flux kind of knows how to continue iterating in a declarative way. And we took Bootstrap and we built that into an operator. And I mean operator literally, right? Flux operator's job is to install and configure Flux for you, and then do some higher order things on top of Flux. And that's really the interesting part. But even in installing, some people are really enjoying Flux operator because instead of managing the controller manifests inside of your control repo, you can get them from an OCI compliant distribution of Flux, and then get auto updates and patches for CDEs if you're following the right distribution. And then from there, you're no longer even dependent on Git for your installation of Flux. Everything is just going straight to OCI. That's started to have us coin this term Gitless GitOps, where all of your desired state doesn't even necessarily come directly from Git, but the clusters are pulling it from the OCI registries that they are directly attached to, which is pretty cool. And you can see why that would be pretty useful in an air gap situation or on a
Yeah.
satellite or a tractor that's photographing apples on apple trees 100 times a second or something like that, right? Yeah.
GitLess
I
GitOps. Yeah. So you're basically making it so that like it's harder and harder to not keep things up to date, right? Like, because normally you're gonna take that information and you're gonna maintain it and you're gonna make sure that you move the version up and update and all that stuff too. But you're talking about like it just updates automatically.
Yeah, so now like the cluster could be following a semver tag series in an OCI repo, and it could be doing that for 10 different or 100 different components. And then you can be controlling those tags in OCI, right? And having a really formal continuous delivery process. This also gives you a place that is really nice for signature verification, right? So we could be co-signing into the SIG-store wrecker on all of our OCI artifacts, and Flux will not deploy any artifacts that are not signed. And then I'm still even just talking about like installation and transport, which these are all things that Flux can do without the operator. But then what? We have this thing called resource sets that can get rid of a lot of boilerplate. And with a Flux operator resource set, you can give it inputs. And those inputs don't have to be static. They can be dynamic, like say pull requests or merge requests in GitLab of a certain label. You can be like, oh, okay, I'm going to use these pull requests as inputs for my tenant resource set. And now you've got things like preview environments are starting to happen for you. Or recently, we just implemented a feature set. Mateus and Stefan built a time-based windows behavior into Flux operator. So a lot of large organizations want like deployment windows, no deploy Fridays.
Yeah.
And on top of Flux is a great way to implement that kind of behavior, not necessarily in the core project, which is always striving for continuous delivery. And so now we can use Flux operator to pin versions and roll out changes to sources and things only during specific windows, right? So it gives you a staging area. But pretty cool. Yeah.
It sounds like you touch a lot of secure slash air gapped environments because you're always kind of talking about like that idea. Like I guess you're seeing a lot more of those lately too. Like I guess everyone's kind of trying to do stuff on prem again instead of everything in the cloud. And
Flux
not
is a
everybody, but
serious
yeah.
toolkit, right? We focus a lot on the front end on usability. Bootstrap solves a usability issue with GitOps and configuration management systems where you're juggling like the state of 3 different systems, right? The infra of the controllers themselves, the computer you're trying to actually reconcile, and then where you're getting desired state from. And then like the more complicated your environment is, the more computers you add, the more people, the more credentials, the more desired state in different repos that you need to point to with different protocols. It just becomes a mess. And Flux is like very usable for solving that problem. But then like the fact that it's even powerful enough and gives you the knobs to do exactly what you need, what your teams need in the shape that you want, you end up seeing Flux in a lot of very serious places. And yeah, that's I think why I mentioned the whole air gap thing pretty frequently.
I remember there was a question that I heard a couple years ago at KubeCon. Is there a UI?
Yeah. So
Is
there
there
are
UI?
actually a couple of different UIs. The
All right,
first
let's see if I
thing
can pull
that's
one up.
most important to understand about Flux is from a security and an architecture and performance standpoint. There is no such thing as the Flux API that does not live inside of the Kubernetes API. So the Flux API is Kubernetes, which means that Kubernetes user interface tools are the first way that you think about interacting with
Okay.
Flux, right? And you can read and write things inside of these tools if you want. Normally, we want changes to be funneling through Git, right? So really, we're thinking about these tools as a way for us to poke things, maybe re-reconcile something, read error messages, get a graph or a flow or a visual representation of what's happening, right? And then we're going to do our work the way we normally do in the IDE, where we edit code. Um, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the future for the user interface of configuration systems like Flux to not live inside of a browser, but actually inside of VS Code itself. And we've messed around with some plugins. But I've heard some pretty raving reviews of the Flux plugin for Headlamp
Yeah.
recently. The Headlamp team has been building quite a nice user interface for Flux. So go check out Headlamp and the Flux plugin. They print a resource graph and show you real-time updates as things change. I also really like that they tell you, they give you a countdown of when the next expected reconcile is, which is kind of fun. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. If anyone has questions too, you feel free to ask questions. We'll answer them in here. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the demo side of this too. So, right, like we talk about Flux, we talk about like what you use it for and how to get started and all that stuff. But if you haven't used it before with vCluster, the first thing I did, all right, so I'm gonna say I'm a Flux noob, right? So the first thing I did is I went to the getting started guide and I went through and I just kind of deployed the example app, right? Like, and I got everything deployed into a virtual cluster. But what we're going to do is we're going to skip that because I think it's a little bit more engaging to go with the how do we deploy a virtual cluster with Flux, and then how do we actually deploy applications into it. So let me go ahead and I can figure out what's the best way to show this off. I'll show you the docs first, but then I've got some configuration and stuff over on this other side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you questions as I go, right? Because I'm going to say, what is this actually doing? Because I got to start out. What is the first thing I do? I bootstrap, right? So I got to start out by bootstrapping. So if I hop over here and I bring up my notes, all right. So this is the live demo part. So hopefully everything works. We're going to try it out. If it doesn't work, that's kind of the point. But I've got an expert here to help me out with Leigh. So we'll see what happens.
Are you already connected to a cluster here? Maybe
I am not yet.
kubectl?
So right now, okay, yeah. So right now, if I go to kubectx, I am on the default cluster, and I have some vClusters there, but I'm not actually creating here. Actually, I'll show this off over here, make it a little bit easier. All right, so I'm on the default cluster, and right now I'm not connected to a vCluster or anything like that. vCluster list, nothing is set up. So what I need to do is start out by bootstrapping, right? So I'm in my Flux directory. I've got my GitHub repository that is already set up here. And it's empty, just has a README, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to go ahead and connect it to this, and I've got my user and all that stuff exported and everything. So I'll do that here.
Just a
So
little note for anyone who's
yeah,
never used Flux Bootstrap. If you don't have a Git repo, you can just give Flux Bootstrap your GitHub user credentials,
okay,
that's in your environment right now. Like you already
yeah,
have your token set. Yeah, and it will just make a repo for you. But if the repo is already there, it'll just use it. And that's what I mean by you can run Flux Bootstrap multiple times. So did you make this repo initially, or did you have
I
Flux
made it.
create it?
I made it to begin with because I wasn't sure. So that's a good question. Okay, so it'll make your own. So some stuff that I did before I'm getting to this point, like I'm just kind of jumping the gun. So I have my GitHub user and I created a access token, right? So that access token I had to create and set up a couple of configuration options. I just went through and I just kept adding permissions as I got error messages, right? But like I have to have like administration has to be read write, right? Because it's got to be able to apply stuff, and then there's some other options that you need within the token. Do you have like what things do I need to make sure that if I just want to have the minimum stuff, what do I need to turn on? Administration.
Read only access to the repo is totally fine. Yeah.
Okay.
So like unless you actually specify the flag read write token to this command right now, Flux, the token could have write permissions, but Flux won't do anything with it. We put it in a different place when it's a read write token.
So I just try to read. If I can do read for the most part for everything, I don't have to do read write. And then
yeah, if you want to use the write token, we have like an extra set of controllers that have automations that actually commit back to your repository.
okay,
But none of that stuff's enabled by default for security reasons. So
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So that's I set up my GitHub user. I set up a token. I've got that stuff exported, and I'm using my GitHub user, and I'm auth so I can actually do some stuff. All right. So I'm going to bootstrap. So I'm bootstrapping now. I'm going to do this in my Flux directory. I'm telling it that this is GitHub user, and my repository is Flux vCluster, which I've already set up in the main branch. And the path that I'm going to be using is cluster. So what does the path mean? The path is where it's going to be watching for changes.
Yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
Flux is going to create what's called the top level customization.
Okay.
And this is a customization that is different from if you've ever used customize locally to build configuration. Flux has a different idea of a customization, which uses customize, but regularly on a schedule, on an interval, to constantly apply and reconcile and drift detect and a bunch of really nice behaviors that you want when you're managing Kubernetes objects. And Flux is going to look at that folder in the top level customization and keep applying it recursively to the cluster. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
All right,
you
so
just put stuff in there and then Flux will put it in your cluster. But if it's outside the folder, it's not going to do anything with it. So you have a place in your repo to do whatever you want.
I think the question here too, I guess, is before I do this, I should probably clone my repository.
Oh, you don't need to. Yeah,
Okay.
Flux will clone that into a temporary directory, make sure it's got the stuff that it needs inside of it, and then yeah, use your local credentials to push anything back.
All right, here we go. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, we're connecting, we're pushing, we're updating. And then you have to let me know what to do after this. Because I think, oh yeah, and then the interval stuff. So that's the question I had too, I guess. So the interval stuff's going to be in some of the configuration values. I saw the like the guides had like 1 minute, but like what's a common interval that I'm looking at? Not 1 minute, maybe like an hour, or like the 1 minute's for testing, but like an hour to like every couple hours, or like you said, there's actually windows I can set up for intervals, I guess, too.
Yeah, the windows will only be at the operator level.
Okay.
So we want all of Flux to always be reconciling, and a change window is really more about pinning versions and when you are allowing a version change to go into the cluster. And that happens with Flux operators dynamic inputs and the cron support for time windows. But otherwise, Flux is just always working its best to follow whatever reference you give it. In this case, it'll be the main branch. But
Okay.
you could point it at a tag. You could point it at a different branch. You could point it at a git SHA, and then it'll never move. And so what Flux has done here is it's generated some manifests for installing Flux. It's installed them to the cluster, and then it's also put them in your repo so that you can manage them directly from the repo. At this point with Bootstrap, you've basically pivoted from talking directly to the cluster to now having Git be your API to the cluster.
Gotcha. All right, so now what I do is I can clone it, so I can go ahead and modify and configure and mess around with stuff. All right. Messing up. All right, hold on a second. Let me clone it. I recently, so like I'm trying to get my fingers back to normal because I recently changed to a new keyboard, and one of my friends was like, "Hey, map the caps lock key to command." And so like half the time I'm trying to, like I use 3 or 4 different keyboards, so I'm trying to remember like which one I'm actually using at the time to do copy paste and then like move around everything. And then on Linux it's a little bit different too. I'm on a Mac.
I feel like I've heard that many times, and it's something that I should do.
It's weird muscle memory. Like you get used to it, you're like, okay, which one I'm using, but then like half the time I'm going between control, command, and then like the other command and stuff, and try to remember which one that I'm doing. Because yeah, it's your pinky for like copy.
I have this like muscle memory of doing finger gymnastics with my thumb.
Yeah, me too.
On control or command or alt or whatever if you're on a Windows computer. Yeah.
But like you never use caps lock for anything basically. Like I never use it, so
ever.
At least like
no,
switch
I just
it over.
Shift when I type.
Yeah. All right, so now we've got the repository. So the next step, if I'll go over, it's kind of hard to show both the docs stuff I got two, but let's see. If we go to the next step, I've got my repository and stuff set up. So now for the vCluster side, what I'm going to actually need, let me see if I can zoom this a little bit more. I think that's easier to read. It's like the vCluster side, a couple of things I'm going to have to configure, right? So I need to make sure that Flux has access to the kube config, because it's going to grab that kube config and it's going to use that to actually interact with and create the virtual cluster, right? And then engage within the virtual cluster too, right? So within my virtual cluster configuration, I'm actually going to add some of this. So like I've got this vCluster YAML and everything that I'm going to actually use. But like one of the things to think about if you're doing it with vCluster is I need to make sure that I enable the kube config export so that I can actually grab that information. Same thing with like Argo or other CI/CD tools. Like I'm going to have to actually grab that to be able to interact with it. So I've done that. Another thing that I've actually done with this demo is since everything is running locally, so like I'm running everything in my basement on a local K3s cluster with like 3 nodes. I don't actually have a public IP address, and I'm just kind of doing self-signed certs and all that stuff too. So I'm going to use Insecure for this just to show the demo. But like say I'm doing this in a cloud provider or something that I can actually get real certs and have a cert authority. I'm going to.
Oh, you're running on a home lab.
Yeah, I'm doing this all in home lab.
I thought you were in a kind cluster. That's cool.
Oh no, yeah, I do everything. So I've got. All right, I'll talk about what I have real quick. I have an old DL360 that's like way too old. And then I've got like I've got Proxmox on it, and I've got 3 VMs. So I'm running on 3 K3s VMs, and then I just do everything there. And I deploy all of it with like Terraform, right? Because there's like a super easy plugin for Proxmox. I was using libvirt plugin, and then I'm just setting everything up with like Ansible, like the K3s Ansible. So that's where I run everything. So I can kind of do. I've got more than one. I've also got another home lab that's it's listed as AI, like if you do the kubectx. And what that really is that's just a gaming computer with a 5070 Ti that I can actually go load models and do like LLM stuff and everything with. So I've got like the GPU operator and stuff on there.
All right, how many gigs of VRAM is on that 5070 Ti?
16, which is enough to do a little bit. I do more with my Mac Studio. Like to get up above 16, you're looking at spending like that was $850 for the 5070. To get higher than that, you're looking at $1,000 to $3,000, right? Like, and nothing's MSRP.
How much unified memory on the Mac Studio?
I'm at 32, so like I don't have a lot, so I can load a little bit bigger models, right? But I can't load the biggest ones because when I bought the thing, which I guess something interesting to talk about, people when people were buying stuff like 2 or 3 years ago, they're probably not thinking about how much memory that they need to actually run LLMs. But like now, when I buy a new laptop or something now, I was like, I need at least like 64 gigs or something like that if I can get up there, so I can actually run a model that won't spit out something that's just completely incorrect, right? Yeah. You load like a 6 or like an 8 gig model or something like that, and you ask like, what is vCluster? And it's like, it's a VMware project. And it's like, no, it's not a VMware project. All right.
Yeah. Cool. vCluster is its own open source project for sure. Yeah. I liked how you said like don't use a model that like spits out stuff that's completely incorrect, or definitely incorrect. Instead, like we're like looking for some of those better models that give you stuff that's subtly incorrect,
Yeah, if at least it knows what it is, it's a little bit closer. I mean, but even like ChatGPT, you kind of have to like say, no, what is vCluster based on this thing, right? But like then now everybody's thinking about like, how do I write my docs in a way that something like ChatGPT is going to give correct information by like crawling it, right? Like, so you have to put probably more information. Like, is that something you're thinking about with like the Flux docs and the Flux team? Is like, oh, it's already done?
Actually, yeah. If you haven't heard, with HTML being so complex, the LLMs tend to really struggle to parse HTML. So it's nice to have a markdown document on your website at the root called llms.text. And this is kind of becoming the LLM SEO. And we do that for the FluxCD website as well as the control plane Flux website, where we publish Flux operator and the Flux enterprise distribution, those kinds of things. But
I don't even know if we're doing that, so now I need to ask, right? Because some of our stuff's getting like some of the older docs and stuff are getting when you search for it, you get like an older version or something like that, and they're getting indexed that way. So, all right, so let me
we've actually written an MCP server as well.
Okay,
just as far as doing the whole AI assisted GitOps thing, and the Flux operator MCP server allows you to export information in your cluster as well as tools like actions that something like Claude or any MCP compliant agent can then actually use to get contextual information, sort of ragify it in an agentic way, and then actually then do tool calling to go and reconcile something in your cluster or update manifest or stuff like that. So
you're saying is you haven't been thinking about LLMs or any of this stuff at all, right? You're
Sorry.
saying, I think you've been spending a lot of time with this, it seems like, and I think other groups now.
Yeah, Stefan has been doing all of the AI R&D with the MCP server, and you mentioned AI UIs earlier, and actually interacting with Flux through like an agentic coding assistant that has MCP access to multiple clusters. You can do some pretty powerful stuff like ask for a resource dependency graph over multiple clusters, and it just prints it for you. And it's usually 100% correct because it's literally getting the information right from the clusters. Pretty cool.
Are y'all sharing that across other CNCF groups? Like, are all the other groups kind of thinking about it too? Or is it like just something that you're lucky to have Stefan and like he's doing everything?
Oh, by the way, we have some chat comments coming in. Yebyan here on YouTube. That's Kingdon Barnett, another maintainer of the project.
Okay, hey.
He says I spent the last 3 weeks chasing after seekable OCI because every LLM thinks it's supported by EKS. 15-minute chat with support confirms that it's never been supported. Yeah, I think the Soki stuff, Phil Estes and the AWS crew over there, they write the seekable OCI bits that end up being deployed, but using them on EKS requires using their specific node images, and then I guess they don't support.
So we're
Yeah,
super lucky to have Stefan. Yeah.
yeah, we are very lucky to have such a prolific and dedicated and principled contributor. I love
Awesome.
working with Stefan. We've been friends for so long now. Kingdon and everyone, Tochi, yeah,
Welcome.
Sanskar.
Thank you for the
Mateus
chat
is part
too.
of the crew now. Yeah, yeah.
All right, let me go.
Anyway, back to deploying the vCluster. So normally, if you were going through a vCluster quick start guide, you would just create a cluster with the CLI would be like the happy path, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you provided that vCluster YAML.
Yep.
But then internally in the CLI, it's actually using a Helm chart
Correct.
to create the vCluster, and then the options are being rendered as Helm values, right?
Yes.
So the really cool thing with Flux is Helm controller uses the Helm SDK natively. So if you want a Helm chart to behave exactly as it's supposed to, Helm controller is the only project in the ecosystem that does it, other than Helm itself. And you can create a Helm release YAML, and you just put it into your repo, and you can pass it values and deploy the vCluster chart. And that's really cool because
What we're
that
gonna
means
do,
you can have a repo that has all of your vClusters in it, and you don't have to manually log into a cluster and then run a bunch of CLI commands.
which is super helpful for like preview environments and that kind of stuff too, and actually keeping stuff up to date, right? Like because yeah, people are gonna use the CLI, but after like eventually, like you don't want to sit there and have every user create it via the CLI. Like you don't want to have to set up ingress and all this stuff and everything for them every time. Being able to just like
Mm-hmm.
modify a couple of like host names and stuff is way
Mm-hmm.
easier, right? So that like some of the people that use like the enterprise stuff like that too. Some of them are using GitOps, some of them aren't necessarily all the way there and everything. So like, what would you say to people that are still stuck in like the day one or day two and not making it to GitOps? Like what? Why should I care? Like if how many? At what point should I care? Like how many clusters? 1 cluster? 10 clusters? Like how many users? Do you think it makes sense
I think the most
immediately?
important thing, right, is like this is a social question, right? Like
Okay.
this is a cultural question. That's the juiciest part about it. Um, I wouldn't force anything on anyone that I work with,
Yeah.
right? Like I want to sit down and have a convo. And it's like if my coworkers are really weak with Git, like we might need to do a workshop first before we ever think
That's
about
true.
doing GitOps, right? Like there are some shops out there that are still using Subversion or a bunch of things. We might have to find some different solutions,
Yeah.
or maybe the platform team like helps like manage some of the things, right? Like every time you want to do a deploy, let's sit down and build a culture together so that we're all, kind of getting used to doing DevOps. And I think that you could have that problem as early as a single cluster if you're managing lots of complex infrastructure, especially if you're running your own databases or things like that with, like Percona's Postgres operator or something.
All right. I know you're like the stuff we're talking about is interesting. I'm gonna do the demo, but like I keep wanting to ask other questions and stuff too because, like I said,
Yeah.
I just messed around with this like first time yesterday, and like it was so easy. Like it was very easy. The only thing that I had issues with, and we'll talk about that too, is like trying to figure out the folder structure, right? Like, but that's not really
Mhm.
that big of a problem compared to like, oh, I just make these modifications and it does stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna do two things. I'm gonna create a vCluster repository, which tells it, here, check out the charts.loft to find the vCluster Helm chart. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a vCluster demo YAML, which is basically the same thing as a vCluster YAML. So it's going to have all my configuration values and stuff like that. And like you said, it's just going to be used by the Helm chart as a values thing. We've created a vCluster.yaml, used to be called just values, right? But we've added a bunch of other stuff to it, like to where you can actually do like a whole lot of configuration and all that to it. So ours is going to be kind of simple. Like we're just going to basically set up. I'm going to name it a little bit different. It's vCluster demo Flux, and then we just tell it the version, and then we do like what the endpoint's going to be. And then we just make sure that we're exporting the kube config so that Flux can actually get that and connect. So I'm going to do that. And then while I'm doing that, if you want to talk about something too, let me go ahead and create these files in the right spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess just to
Right,
qualify,
sources.
as Mike is dancing in the repo as any Kubernetes practitioner would, what we're doing here is we are telling Helm controller, right? So which is one of the Flux controllers inside of Mike's host home lab cluster, that it should go and look at all of the charts inside of the Loft repo, right? So charts.loft.sh. And so we do that with a Helm repo manifest. And then we're going to, from that repo, do a Helm release, right? So that'll be another Kubernetes custom resource. And that Helm release will be basically doing a declarative version of if you were to run the command line for Helm upgrade dash dash install, and then passed it values and pointed it to a chart and gave the release a name and all of these things. So here we've got the Helm repo.
And I'm hopping around a lot. Sorry.
No,
Production.
I feel like this is perfectly easy to follow, honestly.
I should do it via the CLI. So now I'm just trying to make sure I have everything. vCluster demo. All right. vCluster YAML. All right, cool. And then this is I'm gonna paste this stuff in. Like I've made some modifications because I'm changing the host name and that kind of stuff. So I'm not actually using exactly what we show in the guide, right? Like I'm doing something like vCluster demo Flux so that I can name it that way. All right, so cool. So I've got these two. I've added them in there.
You'll notice that this is pointing in that source ref on line 12. That's actually pointing to the Helm repo, right?
Okay.
For the Loft charts, right? So that's the other object you made.
Yep. So I've got the sources, like you said, which I'm at, and then over here I've got the source ref.
Yep.
Anything else interesting here that I should be like talking about? The interval, right? So the interval is 10 minutes. Maybe should I change that to like 1 minute so it's faster for the demo, or it'll automatically kick off the first time it makes a change, and then every 10 minutes after that it does it?
Yeah, basically that's going to be the interval in which Helm controller is checking to see if you enable drift correction. That's something that only Flux's Helm controller can do. No other project does drift correction on Helm releases through the Helm SDK. But yeah, you can just commit that to your repo. So we don't have to talk to the cluster anymore, right? We said we want to talk with our teammates. Right?
I'm gonna cheat.
That happens in Git.
I'm gonna cheat because I'm gonna create that namespace for it first.
Oh, are you gonna throw it into a namespace? Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna create a namespace for it because the vCluster needs a namespace, and then it'll deploy into the namespace for it. So let me make sure I get the right namespace. I think it's vCluster demo Flux. All right, namespace created.
Cool.
And there we go, demo Flux. All right, cool. So we got the namespace, and now that we've got the namespace, let's go over. I don't know if it's easier to look at VS Code, or I can do VS Code here. So now what we'll do is it'll tell us to git add clusters, git commit. And I'm not creating a branch string like that. I'm doing directly main, but for realistically, what you're wanting to do every time I make a change is I'm probably creating a PR, right? Like, and then
if you're in that sort of environment, you know, I'm not going to tell anyone that their Git flow is incorrect. A lot of high performance teams do trunk based development where everyone works on the same branch. Yeah.
Okay. Adding stuff because that's super helpful for people to understand what's going on. And then let's push. And then what we're going to do over here is we are going to vCluster list. Right now we don't have anything, but then what I do is I type. Let me go find it. So
yeah, so you don't have
Flux.
Yeah, Flux reconcile, and then you just have an extra letter in there.
Oh yeah. So am I doing like Git Helm release? Like what am I doing to watch what Flux is doing? Like I can do Flux logs, right? So
yeah. Every Flux resource has very detailed status. Flux logs will also show you everything that it's doing. Failed to get source Helm repo vCluster not found. It looks like pointing to a Helm repo where the name might be something else.
Yeah, maybe I messed it up. Let's see. Did I change something different here?
VS Code.
Oh, make sure it didn't. Okay, so yeah, maybe I did some typing differently. All right, so we're troubleshooting live. That's what we're here for. All right, so let's go sources, vCluster. Did I put it in right?
Helm repo in namespace Flux system, and then in the vCluster demo YAML, if you go to the second manifest, you'll see that this is in a different namespace.
Okay, yeah, so I need to update.
But then you're referencing the Helm repo. Yeah. That also could have just been like an
info error,
a race condition thing.
Race condition. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and let me look at the logs again. Flux logs, and then okay, so this is good stuff for troubleshooting too, right? So,
go ahead and let's do a Flux get all, and then do a -A. because you're using capital A. Yeah. And that will be, you might need to shrink your text a little for the table.
Yep, so you can see a little bit better.
Let
me do it again.
Cool. So basically,
watch something be down right now with like the Helm charts or something like that where it's hosted.
No. This is totally failed to get source vCluster not found, and then there should be a source somewhere.
Make sure again more time. Like maybe since we're using it from yesterday, let me check it again. Like
where did you put the sources in the sources folder?
Yeah, so let me, all right, so maybe okay, so maybe that's the that's what it is. The production should be under Flux system is what it is.
No, that's totally fine there too.
So like that's how I referenced everything. Here, let me make sure at least my folder structure is right. Get status.
Your folder structure is totally fine.
Go to GitHub.
I'm just trying to see the status of the Helm repo. If you could just do a kubectl get Helm repo -a.
Okay, let me do that again. All right, so what was again?
Just do kubectl get Helm repo -A. Yeah, so that's not ending up in the cluster.
All right, so let me make sure I'm in the right spot again. All right, so I'm on default. I've got all this stuff, other stuff configured. It should have access to that. I think
try a flux get customization.
Oh, I wonder if all right, flux get customization.
Applied revision, is that the most recent commit in your repo?
I believe so. Let's see.
Just git log n1.
Yeah. n1 -n1.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the right commit.
Look again.
And then there should be flux get helm release -a. And let's do a
I can go back and let me make sure. So I've got my stuff copied over here on the other side. Let me go back and make sure that I'm.
You have a 10-minute interval on that, right? So if that, the only other thing is that I'm confused about is just that the Helm repo is not there for some reason.
All right, so let me update the interval so we can do a little bit faster. So minute here, and should I change anything in the in here? Is 1 hour interval fine, or should I do like 1 minute?
It should be fine as long as like it's not like the repo is going to change.
All right.
But it's just weird that the repo's not there.
Git commit. Update it again. All right, let's try this. And I'm trying to do something fancy too because I kind of copied stuff over from what I was doing yesterday. So let me make sure that I'm actually like doing what our docs say as well. All right, so I did the bootstrap. I've got the vCluster repository. Did I copy it right? I think so. Helm repository, Flux system. And then namespace Flux system 2, all that stuff's right. I did also like yesterday. So what I did is I'm using the same repository that I was using yesterday and I just delete everything out of it. And then I rebootstrapped and everything. So I don't think that's going to cause issues. Let's see. All right, not created yet. And then let's go ahead and look at the same error messages. Try and get fancy. And okay, so Helm get release. Okay, so now we're getting a different error message. Or now we're in something else. Let's see. And then what's the Flux logs? Let's look at Flux logs again. And then this is the latest one. vCluster not found and the same thing. It was the same thing we were doing yesterday. So what else should I look at? So we're doing live troubleshooting now. So should I be troubleshooting something else? Maybe like
one thing is that you're doing a cross namespace reference of a Helm repo.
Okay.
That should be in. Do we have that enabled by default?
So what you're saying is like I'm using over here, I'm doing everything in Flux system, and then
yeah, I mean the namespace of your Helm release, like just like for your setup, I would say just leaving it in Flux system would be like the simplest thing to do.
Okay.
Normally, like you're going to be if you're going to be using like another namespace, you're going to be dropping privileges to a service account in that namespace and a
Gotcha.
couple of other things, right? And I would say maybe let's just keep everything simple for now, so that we don't have to talk about other Flux concepts.
Okay, so what am I changing here?
I would say set the namespace of that Helm release there.
Right here?
Yeah.
To Flux system?
Yeah, you can actually change the target namespace if you want it to end up in a different place in the vCluster, but like the
Okay.
Helm release itself in your Home Labs hub cluster can
Put it
just
in there.
be next to the Helm repo.
Let me make sure I copy the
That
whole
way
thing.
you don't have to be switching namespaces that you probably haven't created that namespace on. Did you create that namespace in the vCluster? Like like the namespace is not in the repo, right? So
All right,
it's
so
hard for me to imagine. Like,
gotcha.
this is a
So
great
what?
example of why GitOps is good. Is like
So
if
this
you
is
start mixing imperative state,
yeah.
then it gets a little bit difficult to understand, I would imagine.
So I have Flux system from yesterday. Should I have deleted the Flux system and then started fresh?
No,
Maybe this.
no,
Okay.
that's fine.
All right. So I've got Flux system on the host. This is my host cluster, right? So everything I'm doing right now is on the host cluster. So default's the host cluster. So these are all the
Yeah,
namespaces in my host cluster. So I've got Flux system, which you're
yeah.
saying like do that here instead, right? Like, and then I'm just trying to. All right, so this will still like I'm trying to deploy into a namespace for vCluster demo Flux because that's where I've got everything designed to go to, right? Like that's the only reason I have that here. But does that matter for here? Is what you're saying?
So, like, if you are trying to put the Helm release in a namespace in the host cluster, so not the vCluster, then you would want to probably add a namespace YAML to your
Okay,
repo as well for that to live in the host cluster. And then if you want that Helm release to also end up in a namespace inside of the vCluster, then you'd probably also want something for that.
gotcha.
But that's just getting pretty far from like the getting started guide.
All right, so I'm gonna make the update and stuff too. Yeah, so that's where like I did the getting started guide and then I went over to this and configured it with this. So like I'm copy and pasting kind of some of the stuff that I did yesterday that we got working. So let's see. All right, so let me try this. So I'll do this update right here. I've made some changes. Update it again. Git push, and then you're saying that all right. So now it's going to at least find this
our
Helm
ref
repository
is
in the Flux.
C299. Let's go ahead and do a Flux get customization.
All right.
We can see here it's applied 230, and then like if
That's
you
the
do
latest
a
one. What was it?
but
Git.
yeah, just get log.
Make sure that isn't done. Okay, so git log in one, you said?
Yeah. And this is a new ref, right? So it's currently on the old ref, right? It hasn't reconciled yet.
And let's see if the
If you want
logs
to
say
poke it,
anything.
it's just Flux reconcile customization, or let's do source git first, or yeah, Flux reconcile source git.
All right, so hold on. This one right from the 43? This one's earlier. So this is earlier. There's no errors here now. So it's waiting. It should be waiting like doing every minute, right? With fixed Flux logs. All right, tell me what am I typing again? So update it again. Let me just see.
It looks like it's picked it up now.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so I didn't create the vCluster yet. Let's say what other log should I look at just to see like what's going on currently?
Well, what we do want to see is that Flux get customization shows the commit has been applied. So
okay,
let's just get there first.
Okay.
And not, yeah.
So what am I typing out?
Just Flux get customization.
Gotcha.
So now we're on the new ref.
Okay, so you're saying over here. So we're looking at this right here. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you should see Flux get Helm repo or Flux get Helm release, like that. There's probably one of those. And there's no Helm releases in. That is just
not doing there. We broke something. Or I broke something in between this. So let me let's go back. Let's go back and make sure I'm putting stuff in the right spot and everything too, and configuring it. So our guide stuff works. All right. So clusters, sources, vCluster repository. Let me just copy paste this again. And this is the Flux system. So let me paste it there. Oh, is that what it is? Hold on. In my sources toolkit, did I copy paste and I didn't actually add in everything? Let's see.
I should go look at your repo.
Yeah, it might be the sources like this. Did I not put in? Oh, that's what it is. You know what it is? I didn't put in the API version. So that's why I can't find it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not getting errors though.
So
right?
I was missing this. I'm missing this. So it doesn't know what I'm trying to do. Like it doesn't know that it's looking for that maybe. Like that's one of the differences I can see. All right, so let's update this. Let's update this. Let me go back and make sure that I've got stuff deploying into the same namespace that I had before. All right, so here. So git status, add a git commit, add API version, git push. And if anyone has questions while we're doing this too, we're just doing like live demo stuff too. So we're gonna run into errors and everything too. I'll try to get it quick because we're already hitting like 50 minutes. We're taking 50 minutes of your time. I think I'll be able to finally get through it. I think literally that's what it is. I copy pasted and I'm missing the API version on the top. So hopefully that's it. Let's take a look. All right, it's not there yet, but then let's go back to the git, not there yet, and then let's do flux logs.
So the issue, you have a very specific issue here, Mike. That just comes from doing things really quickly. I just looked at your repo, and I can explain what's wrong here.
Let's see. All right, let me post my repo in for those people too, in case they want to follow along, because this is helping me. So
yeah. So if you go into that clusters folder, this is a common gotcha here.
Okay.
There's the only thing in this folder is Flux system, and this is a very fundamental Flux thing that you're only just learning about just now, and it actually has to do with customize. So if you click into Flux system, there is a customization YAML here. Go ahead and click that. So this is the customization YAML, right? API version customize config. And you see how resources here is a list of items?
Yes.
So you're not supposed to put anything in the Flux system folder because Flux system is for managing Flux itself. And so only the GitOps toolkit components and the GitOps toolkit sync are being used in that customized build. As soon as Flux sees a customization YAML inside of a directory, it doesn't do every file. It has to follow exactly what the customization YAML says. So you could add resources there in that list, but usually if you want Flux to generate your own customization without doing other boilerplate stuff, and you just want whatever YAML files are in there, it has to not be in that folder.
Well, what happened is I'm doing VS Code and it auto completes into the folder instead of doing it via the command line, which is what I'm used to doing. So like what I did is I literally put it in the wrong folder. Is what you're saying. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so the Helm release was in a production folder outside of it, but then the sources folder was inside of Flux system. And
so this is what it should look like more instead. I need to have these things a step up.
I think
in clusters.
We're trying to like get that thing deployed like really fast.
And
there were a lot of steps happening, in a kind of panicky way, and it was just a little accident, but this will work perfectly now.
I think it was my IDE. I'm sitting there doing it in the wrong spot. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna
put it's like if you drag like to the it's really easy for the target to be different. Cool.
All right, let's see. Do I have a vCluster yet? Not yet, but let's see. Now it should start picking up stuff, and let's do Flux logs and see what we have now. All right, so Flux logs. So we're looking at it. It's updating, no changes. And then what I can do is look at, all right, so move the stuff out of the right spot. I think I updated all the folders, get Helm release. There's a Helm release. It's waiting to be reconciled. So now we're actually doing stuff because we're looking outside of the Flux system folder, and now it's looking at my sources and my production and all that stuff. So now it's trying to deploy
this will be. I think as also if you do a Flux get Helm, see, so there's a vCluster that was
it's being deployed into
initialization phase. Spinning up another copy of a Kubernetes control plane. With all of the vCluster special bits that merges the networking and the compute and the scheduler. So juicy.
Have you used it yet, or have you you're using Kine for the most part? I know some people are just using like Kine for development and everything, and then I use vCluster.
I love vCluster. vCluster is a really cool project. We actually used it quite a lot for the lab environments. that we did on the KubeCon floor. I think in like
Oh, awesome.
2021 and 2022 when I was working with the VMware Tanzu team. There was like hundreds of V clusters being created in the VMware booth.
You say it's a small world because I worked with a lot of the Knative people too, like that moved
Yeah.
over to VMware and everything.
Yeah,
when
we
I
were
was,
doing a
in Manhattan.
Knative on vCluster demo. And
How did you get Istio to
specifically it
work? Do you have
was to
Istio on the
create
base
like
cluster, or are you using Contour or something?
that one was using the it's not yeah, we were using Contour
Or
for that.
Courier? Courier. I don't know.
We were not using Courier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the Istio adds complications. So that's one of the things. An aside, I don't know. I'm gonna go back to the demo, but the aside is like it was difficult to get people to go straight to Knative because it's like you need to understand Istio in the beginning and get Istio installed and working and everything, and then install Knative after that. So like a lot of people weren't making it to that, right? Even though Knative is an awesome project and the scale to zero and all that stuff is so cool. All right, back to Flux. Back to Flux. We're talking about CNCF stuff, but back to Flux. All right, cool. So we have a virtual cluster that's running now. So like if I vCluster list, I can vCluster connect to vCluster demo Flux, and this will actually connect me into the virtual cluster. Oh, you know what I need to do too? So I need to bring up Docker so I can actually port forward instead. All right, just give me a second to get Docker going. Basically, I restart my computer before I do live demos and stuff like that to make sure that everything is good to go, and half the time it is. All right, so now we're connected to the virtual cluster. So if I kubectx, shows I'm actually in the virtual cluster, and then if I do like kget namespaces and stuff, nothing's there. So like the step after that is I've deployed a virtual cluster using Flux now, right? So using that repository, like if you were to use the same repository setup as I'm using, and you export your GitHub username and your token and all that stuff, and then you create the vCluster with the same stuff, like with the same secret. Basically, you can do the same thing I just did, right? So you can bootstrap, use this, deploy a virtual cluster. There's some things you might want to change, right? Like you need to have the namespace and stuff there. But what do I want to do next, right? Am I going to deploy applications into the vCluster? Is that something interesting, I guess?
Yeah. We have a nice demo app that lets you play with all different pieces of Kubernetes.
And that's, so I guess Stefan, this is Stefan that we're talking about for like the pod info stuff. This is just like the demo to kind of show things off.
Yeah, Stefan built pod info early on in Flux development, like 9 years ago, I think. And it's our app that lets you change colors really easily, on the web page, add logos, inject failures with different rates, all kinds of stuff. You can make the Helm tests fail. It's a great little demo app. And here we're going to be using the Helm chart. I think where is it in the getting started guide? It's like oh yeah, this is it right here, right?
So we basically copy the getting started guide stuff right here for the most part, and then we do something different. So the difference, let me answer some questions here too. So we got Rat Boy and so many vClusters and so many KubeVirt clusters. Yeah, well, do you have any KubeVirts in vClusters, right? Like there's a little bit of like renaming stuff. Like I think maybe we'll do a KubeVirt one here eventually too, but there's some renaming stuff that KubeVirt doesn't like. So like in the enterprise version, like there's an enablement for that. And then Rat Boy, with ingress in place for vCluster, shouldn't you set up a kube context that doesn't need to do Docker port forwarding? Yes. The answer is yes, right? Like, so outside of doing like the demo stuff and everything, what I can do, like I said previously, I was talking about kind of like I'm on prem, so I'm not actually configured with like good DNS and a public interface or a public access to be able to get those certs with like Let's Encrypt. So like I'm only doing like this port forwarding and all that stuff because I'm just kind of messing around. But realistically, if I'm doing it like on EKS or something like that, I'm gonna put a real ingress in front of it, right? Like so that you can actually access that. I'm gonna have a real cert in front of it. I'm not doing the insecure stuff that I'm gonna do here. But yes, that is correct.
That's interesting that's managed as a background port forwarding container.
Yes,
because with you being on a Mac,
is keep it open.
You then need your container runtime to have that proxy. But
until this fall, hopefully this fall with like the container stuff that they're adding in, it'll be a little bit easier enough to run Docker or anything like that, or like I guess OrbStack and all these other tools that I could use. But yeah, so normally what it would do is it would just keep that open and I could proxy to it. But what this does instead is it just brings a container up so that I don't have to actually escape out or go to another window. All right. Yeah. I know, Leigh, I'm keeping you a little bit long. Let me go ahead and get through this.
No, I'm honestly, I'm having a great time. I don't have a meeting, so I'm totally having fun just answering questions over here. Yeah,
for me. All right,
let's deploy the app.
All right, so one of the things I want to point out though first is like, so the stuff here is all using customize, right? Like this is customizations and stuff. Now with our docs, what we actually do is we're just using Helm. So that's the one difference between the two. I mean, there's many other differences, right? But we're gonna do this with Helm instead. So for me, that was a little bit confusing before, because like if you look at our folder structure, like we actually have kind of, I'm gonna get it updated, but we have like a reference folder structure down here where they kind of show like how it should look. I'm not gonna follow this folder structure for this, just testing it out. But like if you do need to see like what we expect for the folder structure and you're going through the docs and stuff, come down a little bit further. I didn't, because I just did the demo, finished it, and didn't realize it was down there. We do have folder structure to kind of give you more information, because it's like, where do I put this? Like, I know that this might look like an absolute path, but that's one thing that I was like kind of confused about. So I'm just going to put it in, the cluster section on that same level. But like, where should I be putting this configuration, you think? So I'm going to put it like in clusters in the same directory.
Yeah, you could put it into that production folder if you want, or you could make a folder in clusters called vCluster apps or something like that. vCluster config, since we're going to be targeting the virtual cluster.
All right, so put that here, and then.
And if we run into a situation where we want to have separate configuration from the clusters folder, which is really common, people will have 10 clusters, and then they want to deploy a mixture of different folders to different clusters.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Then that's when we start to use customizations, Flux customizations in the clusters folder to point to other folders.
Okay. So like what you're saying is like, yeah, instead of this clusters folder, I might have like what we're showing off is another thing on the same level, vCluster apps. And then I'm pointing over to that, which that was confusing to me at first, but like, it's pretty easy. You're saying, because I just reference in the customization where to look for these other files.
Yes.
Like, is that what you're saying? So if I
basically in the clusters folder, it'll apply the top level customization will apply a child customization.
Oh, okay.
And then now you get to split things up, pick different intervals, turn off different API features, and then have status specifically for that folder, right?
Gotcha.
That means that if something fails in one folder, it's not preventing the constant reconciliation of other folders. So
awesome.
So
hold on, Scott's here. That's what that noise was. Hold on, let me add Scott. Hey, Scott. Welcome in.
I
heard a noise. I was like, what is it?
I like to show up like right on time.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. It's good to have you here. Yeah. So far we've deployed a virtual cluster. Now what we're doing is we're going in and we're actually going to deploy an application to that virtual cluster. So I'm going to break it first, and then we're going to do another customization to do the insecure. So I'm going to do what I did first, like yesterday when I was going through it. And then if you want to introduce yourself, Scott, while I'm just kind of copy pasting.
Oh, sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Scott Rigby. I am a Flux community maintainer. Have worked with Leigh for years. We used to work at Weaveworks together, and are in the community. And I also am a Helm maintainer, CNCF ambassador. I organize
everything,
and like the New York KCD and different things like that. So I like to do that, and I'm friends with both of these people.
I want to go to that New York KCD. That sounds like a good time.
Hell yeah. Yeah, definitely want you to come next time. If
I've been to their DevOps days before.
So I met Scott. First time I met Scott was I was sitting at a table at KubeCon talking about like Argo and stuff like that, and people were like, "Oh, I like it because it's got a UI." We said that previously, but then Scott chimes in, "Have you tried Flux? It's got a UI too. Like maybe you should try messing around with Flux. Everything like UI is coming out. This is like 2 or 3 years ago now."
Yeah.
And then get to see Scott every KubeCon for the most part, and always enjoy it. All right, cool. So I've got 2 things. So I've got a repository again. So I've got a repository telling it, where pod info is, and I'm telling it where I want to deploy the pod info, which is going to be in vCluster demo Flux, right? So I haven't created it yet. Let me go ahead and create it again. Let me see vCluster list. So I'm going to connect into. All right, I'm already there. So okay.
Can we look at the Helm release real quick, Mike? I just want to point out something kind of cool about this. The other one. Yep. So here, the Helm release is specifying that it wants to use the pod info chart from the Helm repo source. And this is all standard Flux. But then on line 16, it's pointing to a secret ref for a kubeconfig. And this kubeconfig is being generated by the vCluster Helm release. And so what this is allowing us to do is from Mike's home lab, hub cluster, actually do a Helm release from that cluster into a different cluster. And you can see how you could chain this, and you could do childs of childs. You could have 10, 100 vClusters. It would totally work just fine, right?
All right.
So this is where we started to get that hub and spoke shape. And this works really well with Cluster API as well.
So I got it right here.
I was curious how we were going to do that because vCluster also has Cluster API support.
Yeah, yeah, there is that.
So
hey, Alessandro's here.
You could
Hello.
What's up, Alessandro?
Hey.
Shout out to Ratboy for analogizing the Flux customization to a folder as a symlink. It's the Kubernetes symlink. So
yeah, Braden, if you have any questions too, Ratboy's one of my friends coming into. If you have any questions too about Flux, like please ask him too, because definitely like we'll answer them. All right, so this is what I've shown off what you just talked about. So I've got this secret here, right? Like because I need to know about the kube config for vCluster. Same thing for like any of the CI/CD. Like if I'm going to connect to it, I need to know the kube config so I can connect to it and add in. And for like automation and that kind of stuff, I need to be able to just find it instead of actually having to go in and get it and export it or save it somewhere. So that's what you said. That's what I've done. So this is on the host cluster in the namespace where I'm actually running the vCluster. I've created vCluster Flux kube config, and that'll actually be able to give me the kube configuration that I need to connect. All right, so I've got this set up. I've got the repository and stuff set up for this. Let me save everything, and then we're going to run into an error, but then you're going to tell me how to fix that. So the error is going to be the insecure error, right? So, but we're going to troubleshoot that real quick, and then I'll put out a customization and make that update. All right, so let's do. Let's add all, git commit, and then added some more stuff. The best.
Mike,
I'm trying to trigger people with these awful like. So now we're gonna.
Are you all considering this a management cluster model? I know, Leigh, you mentioned a hub and spoke options or possibilities. For now,
let me go back up to the.
We're right now just thinking we've got one cluster, and that's seems to be the management cluster because you're using that to manage Helm releases in the
another cluster. Yeah.
Are you also doing these as full Helm releases in the sense that you're adding the Helm metadata secret to those other clusters as well, so you could still operate?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because you don't have to with Flux.
Great question from a Helm maintainer. So because the Flux Helm controller uses the Helm SDK, and then the Helm release needs storage, right? Helm has history. It needs to render the chart. It needs to differ what happened before from what happens next. And that storage ends up in a secret that Helm labels and uses names to get versions of. That secret ends up in the vCluster. Yeah, okay. But it is managed by the host cluster, which is Mike's home lab. But then the cool thing about vCluster is really the virtual cluster is part of the host, right?
Yeah.
So like you're just sectioning off and creating a new failure domain for the Kubernetes API and the scheduler, but then like kind of carving it up in a nice way to get those beautiful multi-tenant behaviors.
Yeah. It's like if I do this, like you're talking about, like everything's still running. This is so kubectx. If I kubectx, I'm on my default cluster. Like I'm not in the virtual cluster, and what you're saying is that basically everything is still running on the host cluster. So this is my host cluster, my lab cluster. This isn't the vCluster. I've got all the stuff that's running here, and I can actually investigate and see what's actually created. All right, so I think I created this thing, but I think if I go to, let me type out the same command and look at the log. So if I do flux get Helm releases, and then in that namespace, I should have an error message right here, right? So this is the error I'm talking about. So this is what we ran into yesterday, right? Like, so we're doing. I don't have real certificates. I don't have any of that stuff running. I'm just doing this like to test out. But like in a real environment, you're not going to do insecure. But to fix this, if you're just testing out and playing with it, right? Like what do? I go into, let's go over to my setup here, and it's going to be in the customization. So I go to Flux system. Customizations, and then I got the patches still. So now I'm going to patch. So these patches, it's a way to kind of keep an idea of like what's changing after I've modified stuff. Like it's obviously this customization thing, but I'm just going to patch this to force the update.
Yeah, we're adding a controller flag to both the customized controller and Helm controller deployments to basically allow them to connect with insecure TLS for kube configs that ask for it.
Don't do it in
So
production.
you've already configured the vCluster to build a kube config that says, hey, this is going to be an insecure connection.
Yeah.
But by default, for security reasons, Helm controller and customized controller won't do that for you. But we can use the Flux system folder here, and all we have to do is commit to Git, and that's going to change the Flux controller configuration. And when everything comes back up, it'll all reconcile.
And then Rapple is saying, it's okay to tell it to use API insecure for the home controller, I guess, because it's all local, or like, would you prefer everything inside to be TLS, like in using real certificates and real hosts? Because
like I mean, if we're on a production platform doing stuff that matters, I think, as the platform engineer, I would go and generate I would at least put the CA bundle.
Yeah.
A lot of people will patch like a private CA bundle
Gotcha.
right here. Like they'll add a volume mount to some persistent volume and configure the Flux controllers to have a CA bundle that trusts their private CAs or whatever. So you don't necessarily have to get like an internet attested, TLS certificate to make this secure. But
all right, so this commit is fixed it? Question mark. All right.
We're about to find out.
Let's go back over. All right, so now what we can do is look at this a couple times, and I'll give it like a minute because it takes about a minute for it to check, like right in intervals,
if you
right?
do maybe like kubectl get deploy, -n flux system.
All right, so you show me all the cool commands.
So we haven't reconciled that change into the cluster yet. If you want that to happen faster,
now we have. All right, so now what we've done is we've deployed that pod info in there. So let's do a vCluster list. We're going to go back from our default cluster, and we're going to go ahead and vCluster connect. And then let's go ahead and I'll show it both places, right? So if I get namespaces, get all namespace.
There's a pod info namespace in here, 30 seconds old.
All right, so this hasn't deployed yet. So the pod info is deployed. We don't have the actual pod running, or unless
no, it is.
It's in pod info.
The target namespace is set to pod info. So there should be stuff in there, right?
I think I set it to this one, but we'll give it a second.
No, that's the namespace that you're managing the Helm release from in the hub cluster. But then if you look at the Helm release definition for pod info, and you look at line, it's a little bit lower. Oh yeah. 20 and 21, the release name and the target namespace.
Okay, I see.
So you can manage the namespace that is the destination for the Helm release. It's an optional field. You can override it to be something else.
So it hasn't deployed the pod yet. So what do we look at next? So
I think you just have a hyphen there. That's
I see. Yep.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. The app
all right, and then
if Flux says it's good, right? Like.
Not only that, but for a while now. Not just is the Helm release good, but if Flux says that it's good, it also means the resources that the Helm release are managing are what
healthy.
You expected.
Yeah, I think if you enable the health checks.
Yeah.
And then I'm jumping around. I was in the vCluster. I showed it there. Now I'm going back to the host cluster and I'm just showing it like, hey, so this is all the stuff's running in the vCluster on it's running.
Yeah, that's right. That ends up.
You can inspect it still, or like as a platform person or something like that if you want to.
That's really cool.
So cool. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess there's a service for that. Like, can we port forward to the service and pull it up or something?
For this one, I guess I could. Let me see.
So ports 9898. It looks like.
Was this actually going to bring up? This actually bring up like a website, as you were saying, like
yeah.
All right, I hardly ever port forwarding in. Was it port? Or do I have to like select a pod? I don't remember. Or it
does have to be like in that namespace. It might be kind of annoying. Yeah. To get it all.
All right, let me do. All right, so
you can port forward
and then
pod,
80
deployment 90, service. Or excuse me, yeah.
Was it 9098 to, and I can put it to like 101 or something like that. I don't remember if I do like.
You can
try
also
to do this like
use-
from memory. Like I might have to look up port forward again because I don't know if
You
I
can also
actually
just
did
do
this right.
0, and it will give a dynamic allocation of a free,
Okay.
of a free port in the right.
Look up port
In the
forward
right
again
range.
because I hardly ever port forward anymore because I'm not a developer. So let me make sure I'm actually using the command. All right, so kubectl port forward. All right, so kubectl port forward. I'll do the pod instead if that works. Pod, and then I don't have to do. Okay, so then it's you're saying 0. I can allocate 0 to 1011. Which one's running? That's what I forget.
I think you can just probably just do 98, 98.
2007. I gotta do it reversed. So 10 or say 0, 1, 0, 1. I'm gonna bring it up on 1011, and then I will 98, 98, and then I'll actually spell port forward correct. And I need to give it a namespace. I need to give it a namespace too. Yeah, so like it's as in like all the stuff's like running in different places. If I was doing this on the vCluster itself, I would just be doing this in the pod.
Yeah, because you're already forwarded to the API, and then
all right, here we go.
Port forward within the port forward. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, right. What I meant by the 0 is like, say, it doesn't. I mean, it's just
anything.
Instead of the 10.1.1.1, you could put a 0.
Yeah, but you wanted a specific.
For example,
let me bring this over.
Handling connection. Okay, cool.
Oh yeah, I opened it up in like the another.
Yeah, did it come up?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring it up in something you can actually see. It might be a little
Did I
bit
pick the right port?
Yeah, there we go.
Hey, let's go! That's the cutest little mascot. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Tamo Nakahara drew that like a long time ago.
It looks
Here we
awesome.
go. So this is in the vCluster. Yeah.
Yes, this is in the virtual cluster. I mean, obviously, so we're doing port forwarding, but obviously I could do ingress and that kind of stuff too, and I could add ingress controller and all that, and I could sync that to the host cluster and like get access to all that too. But yeah, so basically what we did is we deployed a virtual cluster with Flux, right? Like, and then in the same repository, we said, okay, now within that virtual cluster, I want to deploy this application, right? So now we're able to add more applications if we want to, and then if we want to make a modification to this application, you're saying like I go into like what can I change in here just to kind of show it off real quick. So if I go to where are you saying change the colors and stuff like that, or is, that might be beyond
info app YAML. Here in values, there's an ingress. So the UI message there deployed by Flux to virtual cluster. You can type whatever you want there.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right, let's make that change.
Looks like our interval on this is 30 minutes, so we might have to.
Oh yeah, it's not gonna go. All right, well, let me.
You could change that to a minute if you want. Yeah.
A minute. All right, let's get.
Or actually, that does not matter now that I think about it. Yeah, for anyone watching, don't make the change that we just made.
Because just leave it to where it is.
That doesn't matter because as soon as the Helm release spec changes, then it'll get redeployed.
This is really cool though, because like I want to do. All right, so here's the question I have. Right, so I have a GitHub action or something like that, doing a preview environment. What do you use to build images? Right, because I make a change to my code.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I want it to go build an image so that I can put that image as what I'm deploying for Flux, right? Because I can't just deploy obviously the code. I have to have a pod or something like that, or I have to have a container.
Yes, yeah.
Deploy to. What are you using? Just a generic question. Like if I'm going to set up preview environments, what is my workflow? Flux plus what?
I would probably just run build kit inside of GitHub Actions or something.
GitHub
like
Action,
that.
okay. And then that'll build the image and it'll push it to like Docker for me or whatever I want to have, and then I can just pull that as a variable and say use this tag.
Yes. There's even a controller that you don't have deployed right now. It's a bootstrap option that you can just add and just run bootstrap again. Called image automation controller. It works in concert with another controller called image reflector controller to get information from OCI directly, and then follow some policy that you define, and then you can have image automations that then commit those changes back to your repo for you. So you don't even need to go and update the tag if you want. You can have Flux do it.
Let me do it. So what I did is I recreated the image got recreated, so I have to do it's a new image, right?
Yeah, because it's not running through an actual stable ingress controller, so we got to port forward to it again.
So with like Yeah, with like the ingress I have configured there, it's not actually working. But if I change that to an actual host name, which maybe for like if when I do a real video demo,
Yeah.
produce, I'll actually add ingress in front of it, so I don't have to do all this port forwarding and stuff to kind of show it. But that's pretty cool. All right, so let's see. Sweet. All right, cool. So that updated. Yeah, so everything updated. It redeployed the pod, took my updates.
And
normally,
that update was just a git commit. Like, just to stress, like this is GitOps because we didn't have to tell the cluster to do anything, right?
Yeah.
Like this is pure continuous delivery from whatever the desired state was from the result of collaborating with us three as teammates in Git. So
yeah, I missed earlier that. Did you set up webhooks, or did you?
No, there's no webhooks
reconciliation.
On this one right now. Yeah. So just for some context, Mike, if like when you were like refreshing it, like hungry for the update, Flux's notification controller can accept GitHub webhooks.
Okay.
Yeah, or any webhooks you want. There's like a generic thing. A lot of people use that for all sorts of automations. But
yeah. And so for context, that doesn't mean that it's no longer a pull model.
Yeah.
It just means that if you want the same, like,
you get reactivity
as a push model, exactly.
Yeah. So it's like it's still gonna reconcile on whatever intervals you say, but a lot of people are completely satisfied to back off the intervals for performance reasons, and then just have webhooks kind of notifying to get those fresh updates. But yeah.
Thank you for watching the chat for me too while I was doing all this stuff too. Yeah, Rapaway, awesome. Thanks for the comments. All right, cool. So let me go back. So what we've done here is, if we look at the configuration, you're talking about hub and spoke. So like, what do I do next, right? Like, so I've done this, I've deployed stuff. Like, that's a very open-ended question, right? Like, who knows what I'm doing next? Because what's my use case, right? But like, what do I do next? You're saying like, clean up my folder, set up a little bit, maybe move.
Yeah, you could start moving
like
things around, separating them a little bit. A big thing that you could do is when you start separating folders, you could also be creating service accounts.
Okay.
And you don't actually have to create the service account object. You just have to start referencing it by name and with role bindings. And what those role bindings will allow you to do is say, instead of having cluster admin access across the entire cluster to do whatever you want, you'd say, in this folder, we only have admin access to 1 namespace or 5 namespaces in this folder, right? And that's where you start to get to, okay, like I'm a platform team. I want to provision 100 vClusters. I'm talking with 30 dev teams. I want to give these vClusters out so that they can, deploy their apps. I'm going to hook them up to different Git repos. And those Git repos are only going to have the permissions that they need so that they can't damage the infrastructure of other people's clusters. So
gotcha.
Exactly. And, a common question to that end with what Leigh is talking about is, how do I structure my Git repo? And people feel often pretty stuck on that because they're like, I don't want to put myself in a corner. Nobody puts baby in a corner. But, it's like, what we often tell people is that Flux is actually very, very flexible with this. So you can, when Leigh mentioned like creating new folders and creating service accounts in those folders and so on, a good step in between is you can easily, with no downtime even, you can split one customization into a number of different directories that have multiple customizations, so that you can then, as you see fit, move those to a new Git repo. Or if you have separate Git repos and you actually want to consolidate them, you can completely do that. All you do is, you can put them in the same customization, which means that there's one interval looking for changes. You can split them into different sources as well, right?
Yeah.
But in any case, like, what it allows you to do is really like let your Git structure and the boundaries of your Git repositories, similar to tenancy in namespaces, like either hard or soft tenancy within Kubernetes. You can do a similar thing with Git repos. Let's say you're on GitHub, just because we are right now. It could be other tools, but if tools have a code owners file option, you can give different permissions through a code owners file within the same repo, say a monorepo. You can also split into different teams as your teams in your organization change. You can actually have the hard multi-tenancy option by doing separate Git repos and
multi-org.
Multi-org, right? And all you do,
totally fine,
because your org I mean, if you're in any kind of business that changes, which every single company I've been in has
Yeah.
at some point, you can do that without any downtime with Flux. All you do is you pause the reconciliation in for Flux, and then you move and change your you either Git sources and or the customizations, and then you unpause reconciliation again, and it just kicks back off without changing anything, as long as you didn't change your definitions.
And really, the pausing is just for confidence and safety. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
if you really know what you're doing, like, you don't have to pause anything. Like, you can
Yeah.
just start moving stuff and it totally
Take
works.
down like Cloudflare.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's
Like, wait-
exactly. It's just an extra safety measure.
Yeah, you're like, oh, like, is this really gonna like work the way I want? You know? Like,
Yeah, Pinky, Robbie, and I did a talk a while back about showing how you can do that kind of those kinds of like repo directory splits and multi-Git repository splits and merges back again while saving Git history as well.
That sounds like a really good topic for a talk. I've actually never
saw that one?
a demo of that before. Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes
it's still
total sense.
it's still up there. I'll find it and link it.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So I want to go back to the service count thing real quick, and then I'm going to see like what's up with what's next with Flux. Like service count's interesting too, because you're saying like, you know, as a platform team administrator, I might need access to everything, right? Like, and that's
Yes.
going to create the original virtual cluster. Or
Yeah.
no, or maybe I want to give my users the ability to just create the virtual cluster, but I want to limit them very heavily, and they can create the virtual cluster that way. So I limit their scope. But within the virtual cluster, they can be admin. They can do whatever they want. So I can
Yes.
give them access as like an admin to make sure the service count says everything is available. And then what I do is I just manage basically what they're able to do on the host cluster, like within the namespace, like setting up, you know, limits and things like that, right? Like,
Yeah. You could enforce resource limits, like a resource count limits at the namespace level, and that's a really nice boundary to have, right? It's like you can see, okay, you can make a vCluster as long as you can do a Helm release in the host, right? So let's give people the ability to create Helm releases of a particular Helm repository and Helm chart, but nothing else, right? Make your vCluster, and then here's your Helm app repo, right? We'll also pre-create those for you as the platform admins, and then now you can publish whatever charts you want, and within your namespace with your vClusters, you could have 4 or 5 of them if you would like. Then you can do whatever you want with Flux and just be in Kubernetes land without the risk of, you know, like negatively impacting the scheduler of the host and the network of the host and all that. So really cool.
Yeah, we're talking about like customization versus Helm. I guess at least most of the docs too for Flux seem to be like customization based. Is that just because you're using customization?
So
within?
it's not a either or versus
yeah.
thing. The thing that's not showing up here, right, is when you do a bootstrap, you get a customization for the top level clusters directory. And so you're always using customize with Flux. It's always looking inside of folders.
Okay.
I shouldn't say always. There are people who only use Helm with Flux. But in general, when you want to apply a folder, then you will use a customization. If you want to do a Helm release of a chart, you'll use a Helm release. And people will combine these things so that they can get like the service accounts and the RBAC and the namespaces and the limits and the network policies and all of that, and config maps and secrets from API keys. And they want to configure Cert Manager with, you know, a certificate resource. All of that stuff people will usually just do in a folder in a customization.
Gone are the days of choosing. You're just using everything now.
And then they'll use a Helm release, right? And the Helm release will be supported by all of that other generic Kubernetes configuration, right?
Yeah. And also, Leigh, right? Like we use the unless something has changed upstream that I didn't know about, we use the customization Flux custom resource to tell Flux to apply the Helm release resource.
Typically, yeah.
Right? Unless
nothing stops you from writing a Helm chart that has Flux Helm releases in it.
Okay.
But people don't usually go that far. You just use a customization, and then the customization applies a folder, and there are Helm releases in that folder. And now you're slinging apps into your distributed computer.
Exactly. And there are like different ways even to use Customize and Helm together in that way. Like say you have, I think Stefan wrote a long time ago now, like a good example repository that uses Flux and Customize together on the, or excuse me, Helm and Customize together with Flux on the front side of it, where you've got one Helm release, but you want some changes depending on the environment. And then you use
the post renderer.
Well, that even before then, like, I mean, like you use Customize overlays to say, I'm just going to change a few of these values across my repositories. And then you only just really define one Helm release in the repository. So you're sort of using Customize the way it's supposed to be used in that way.
To make that example more concrete here, Mike, say we
I'm just enjoying the talking. Scott's forgotten more than I know, right? Like,
say we made a folder that had the vCluster Helm release in it. And then we gave it a couple of options using Customize. Then people could patch their vCluster options using a customization, right? And it, like, you would be able to release that Helm release 100 times, you know, using Customize or something. But,
exactly. Like, or like even dev stage prod or something or whatever.
Yes,
you know?
yeah, those
like
sorts of layers. Again, like the whole programming model of Flux is you can do pretty much whatever the heck you want, and you can create whatever shape is needed for your org. So if you're like, gosh, I don't know how I'm going to work with these 3 dev teams who each want to deploy 30 apps each. I don't know what your use case is, but frankly, Flux isn't going to stop you. Do whatever you need. It's going to be there to hold your hand.
Exactly. And then what you just mentioned, which that you thought I was talking about in the first place, is using Customize kind of on the back end of Helm releases. You mentioned, Leigh, the post renderers.
Yeah, if a chart isn't doing enough of what you want, then you can patch stuff with Customize as well. So
yeah, and that's the same thing as when you use the Helm CLI and you type in bash post render equals, say, some bash script that has like Customize built into it that allows you to apply customization patches. That's if you have a chart, like Leigh said, if it doesn't allow you customization. I think what you mean is if it's not templated to like say add the thing you want, you can actually like use Helm's post renderer without Fluxer or Customize or whatever to make your changes and still have it a Helm release, as opposed to doing what I guess what Argo always does, which is like you do the Helm template and then kubectl apply. Essentially, it allows it to still be a Helm release. So Flux has this built in a structured way that allows you to specify Customize patches.
Yeah, and do all the drift correction and still run Helm tests and all of that as if it's literally a Helm chart. But yeah, I mean, bringing that to the vCluster use case, I would imagine the vCluster chart gives you all of the options that you need to, you know, manage the Kubernetes cluster itself. And then these things would just matter for the app teams deploying their Helm charts or something to the cluster. Yeah.
So like I think one of the benefits too, I don't know, wrap, I know, an hour and a half, sorry. Like one of the benefits too, I guess, is saying like, say I rip Flux out for some reason, like I still have all my stuff deployed, which might be different for other applications, right? Like, is that one of the benefits? Maybe it's different now. Like say I'm like, oh, I don't need Flux anymore, I'm gonna get rid of it. Is all my stuff still deployed already? Yeah. It's just not gonna get updated.
Yeah,
right?
you're safe to just remove Flux from a cluster and it just keeps chugging along as if you had, you know, taken the engine or taken the steering wheel off of the airplane, but left the engines running. Yeah. All
right, I'm gonna get these links from you too, Scott, and I'll put them in the video description. And I think after even messing around with this, like hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I got to work on the Kai scheduler next. AI's hot, right? I want to do a Flux preview environment, actual real video, like to where it's like produced and everything. I'll try to have a demo out with that, and then I'll put it in the vCluster examples. But all right, but still, questions for y'all before we go. Where can we see y'all next? Are you speaking anywhere? Are you be at KubeCon, KCDs, or anything like that? Where can we see you? And then also, how do we get in contact with you, or do we join CNCF to just talk like in the Flux Slack channel? Like where are we going? Kubernetes or CNCF Slack now? I think that's confusing.
Yeah, as far as Flux on the Kubernetes and CNCF Slacks, there is a GitOps channel in the Kubernetes Slack, and there are several Flux channels for different topics on the CNCF Slack. We also have the community calls weekly. There's a Europe time slot and a US time slot that alternate over the weeks. You can see that in the community section on FluxCD.io. Come and join our call and you know, tell us what you're doing with Flux, or if you want to do weird vCluster things, you know, see there.
People show up and say, there's too much noise outside, or just like random like complaints, like it's a community meeting.
One more thing, FluxCon is happening at KubeCon North America. So we'd love to see all of you there. CFP is closed. We are selecting speakers now, and we'll be announcing them very soon. The program committee is excited to be reviewing the numerous. We got way more submissions than we needed,
Wow.
so we have to pare it down. Lots of exciting Flux users. Ratboy, we'll see you there at FluxCon. So excited. Maybe we'll see you speaking. I don't know. Maybe you submitted.
Braden, did you submit anything, Braden? That'd be pretty cool. Well, he's doing some cool stuff. I don't want to talk about it here. I'm gonna bring him on eventually because he's doing a lot with like crossplay and other stuff too. But
yeah, sounds like we have some pretty dedicated Flux users all around, and it's gonna be the congregation of people doing cool stuff at scale in a secure way. But Mike, thanks so much for having us on.
Oh yeah, it was awesome.
This is really fun.
I'll add a bunch of links and stuff into the description too for people that are watching this later, so that you can actually go to the things that we're talking about, like FluxCon and that kind of stuff too. And then Scott, where can we see you next? Where are you going to be? You're everywhere.
Well, let's see. Next I'll be in KCD, Colombia.
Oh wow!
I'll be giving a talk there about basically some replicated stuff, but like community stuff. So there's an AI project for Helm called Chartsmith. That replicated started as a project, decided not to monetize as a product, and open sourced it. So I gave a talk on that at KCD Guatemala. Basically asked a friend to get up on stage with me, and I said one line, and then they gave a Spanish translation of it. And we kind of went back and forth like that throughout the whole talk, and it was super engaging. So, so they wanted me to do that in Bogota as well. But I'm going to be talking about like this new project called Secure Build by Replicated. That it's basically it's another CVE 0 container, service and package service.
Mm-hmm.
But the big difference is it shares 70% of the revenue with the maintainers.
With the maintainers themselves.
That's cool.
Yep.
So I'm really hoping this model. I mean, I also want the product at Replicated, because I work there, to be successful, and so far it already is getting there. Even though it's brand new, but I'm really hoping that the model catches on. Because
what is the model now? Like, so I hear it's like if you're doing everything that's latest, it's free. Like that's the model, right? Like, but if you want stuff that's older, you need to get CVEs and stuff like that to update.
Oh, like, no, it's a paid service.
Okay.
It's a paid service, very similar to ChainGuard, Docker hardened images, and the number of other services out there. That just the major difference is the revenue sharing model. That it gives the lion's share of the proceeds to the people who work on the actual projects that we all profit from, or that all these services profit from.
And to clarify the value of this business model, which companies like Replicated and ChainGuard are proving people are willing to pay for, is like, I think open source maintainers are very willing, to issue a new build, to rebuild stuff through their build systems. But like every CVE that affects your project, if you had to build your project every time a CVE affected you, like you would be releasing twice a day.
Wow.
Absolutely. And it's actually very complicated. I used to think
it's usually it's the CVEs in the base images, right? Like we have CVEs that we patch for like the Flux Enterprise distribution regularly. They're never really involved with Flux because Flux is very secure, right? There was recently a Git CVE. It ended up not affecting Flux. There was a Helm CVE just 2 days ago. Didn't affect Flux. But we patch anyway,
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's it's also the APK packages themselves. So, and some of them have circular dependencies, and some of them depend on themselves. And it's actually pretty complex.
Like you're not going to get Go or C or Alpine Linux patches unless they're like incredibly critical and directly affect the software itself. But I mean, like if there's Alpine Linux CVEs for some NSS thing or some config thing, right? Like you can't be asking the Flux maintainers or the maintainers of any open source project to just be like patching stuff for your corporate infra for free all the time. And I think like with this secure images product that Replicated is doing, they're going to be presumably offering Flux images.
Yep, exactly. And
Yeah.
basically, if
You have an
the
image for
project
kubectl.
partners, they get the revenue,
Yeah.
or a big percentage of the revenue.
Yeah. So like anytime you're, like paying for like usage of kubectl, at your big Fortune 50 company, you'll be paying replicated, and they'll be sending 70% of that back over to the Kubernetes project, which will be really cool. So.
It's like a good motivator to keep people working on it too, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which we need because security's hard.
Oh yeah. Oh geez.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, happy to chat about it with anyone. Yes, I'll be talking there, and then I'll be doing a keynote at KCD El Salvador, and then
it's all over the place.
I know, and
nice vacation.
Yeah, you're hopping all around South America.
It's my first time in Latin. This year has been my first time in Latin America, and now I'm doing it 3 times.
Oh wow!
But then we'll see you in Atlanta.
Yeah. We'll see you there, right, Mike?
I should be there, I believe. Yeah. I'm usually at the US ones. Like we have a lot of people in Europe too, so mostly they'll go to the Europe ones. I went to Amsterdam. I want to go to Amsterdam again. Like that was a lot of fun, the last one. So we'll see.
Sounds like Ratboy will be there. I think Kingdon will also be there. So
very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you all. Thanks for putting this together, Mike.
And no problem.
Sorry for getting the time wrong. We talked about 2 different times, and I thought it was the one at 9. But we got to have some time together.
You're fine. I'm glad you showed up. We ended up doing almost 2 hours anyways, right? Like so you're here for the most part. It was a lot of fun. I want to wrap it up so I can let you all go back about your day, because I told you I was take like 45 minutes, and now I've taken like an extra hour. But hopefully everybody enjoyed that. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you got to ask questions about Flux. If you're watching this after, check the description and then go join the different Flux channels and stuff like that. Interested in vCluster, like we'll have links and all that stuff there too. But thank you both for your time. I'm glad we got it working, right? Like we showed like a little bit of troubleshooting too, which was hopefully helpful. But
that customization YAML thing versus the automatically picking up YAML files, that's a really important part about Flux that, if someone's never touched it before, like now they know. So
and I'll say a hint, I haven't touched Flux until yesterday, right? Like when we were able to get vCluster deployed and stuff deployed onto it, right? I mean, I do mostly demos, so like I'll touch Argo here and there, but like I really don't, maintain infrastructure anymore. Right, like so I don't get to like play and have a reason for it beyond like doing like demos and making videos. But
yeah, I mean the really cool thing is that now you've iterated to this state. Like you can just leave that repo as is, and the next time you want to operate on this demo or iterate on it, you literally just bootstrap and you're at the same place you were. So
I could use this to create demos that I want to like show off. Like someone recently was talking about the Cert Manager CSI, which I've never even touched. I didn't even realize you're doing that to store stuff on like a storage, right? Instead, which you have to deploy all CSIs and all that stuff on the host cluster. Right, like you do it in the vCluster, and then you just like share it up. All right, before I start talking about more, let me let y'all go so that you can go about your day. And so I have another. I'll be here in a couple more weeks doing another one of these. We'll do another one of these like next week. We're gonna have them hopefully like every Friday and stuff. Maybe I'll have on about like Helm or something like that too, and we'll talk about some of these other things. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you for everybody for joining, and I'm gonna let y'all go and in the stream. All right, see everybody.